So this week, Thom Yorke has landed in Canada to begin a solo tour of North America, and he's been sort of jumping in that direction lately. His new solo record is called ANIMA. It's the sound of Thom Yorke confronting the chaos and dystopia of the modern world as only he can. I talked to Thom Yorke from our studio in Montreal. We talked about his new solo stuff, his nostalgia for the early days of his band Radiohead, who exploded with one gigantic hit in the 90s and then sort of used that hit to become an important artistic force for the rest of their career. We also talk about the death of his friend Scott Johnson. He died when scaffolding fell on him at a Radiohead gig at Downsview Park in Toronto in 2012. But first, when I got on the line with Thom Yorke, I asked him how it feels just when he gets on stage by himself as a solo artist. No bandmates, just him.
It's taken me a long time to get used to it, to be perfectly honest. I think it was one of those things that started as an experiment originally just as a sort of electronic DJ show, and we were doing sort of kind of rave type gigs. And we realized after a while that playing to a bunch of guys on ecstasy, guys and girls on ecstasy, wasn't possibly the best way to get our point across, given what else was going on. So we sort of moved it into theatres, and then it became something quite different. So the main thing for me is not having a live band behind me and having machinery being operated by Nigel and myself and Tarek is odd. But I've got my head around it now, and it's quite liberating in an odd sort of way. It's very different. I mean, people do this stuff all the time now. It's not a big deal in the hip hop world. Yeah. But for me, it was quite a leap. And I sort of came about it a certain way, and sort of have enjoyed the messing with the expectations of what the audience might expect me to be doing, because I no longer have a guitar around my neck or anything as authentic and wholesome as that.
I mean, with respect to your audience and what they were going through,
yeah, right.
What a trip that must have been. To go from playing big arenas and big stadiums to going on stage in front of kind of sketched out teens at 2 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. There's an element of confusion going on all parts. There's some spectacular moments as well. There was one where we came on stage somewhere, was it Houston or something? And the bass bins were directly under the stage, and the computer that's operating the main loop system just flew off its stand into the audience. At the same time, I think, as I was berating someone with a luminous tambourine who wouldn't stop shaking it. There's been some odd nights. I
think I had a fever dream like that one time about you doing that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Nigel there, Nigel Godrich. He's on this tour with you. I mean, of course, if folks who are fans of Radiohead will know him as sort of an unofficial member of the band. I'm curious, do you remember the first time you met Nigel?
Well, he was there picking the pieces up a lot of the time during the band session. So we met him when we were working with John Leckie, and he was operating the tape machine, and he was like a renowned, experienced engineer at Rack Studios. And then we basically, John Leckie had a couple of days off, and we did some B-sides and just realised, wow, we just hit it off with him straight away. The way he worked very fast, and he just made things happen. And he was our age, and so at the end of the thing, at the end of the record, I sort of took him aside and said, do you think maybe you'd want to and it went from there, really. And the first thing he did was we gave him a load of money and say we want to build our own studio. And so he went and constructed this portable studio system that we used to do OK Computer. So I don't know. He's always been around. As I say, the best thing is he's just there, ready to finish stuff. I mean, it can be awkward when I don't know what the hell I'm doing and he wants me to finish something.
Yeah.
But then that's you need that pressure,
I want to play a bit of new music from the new record. This is Twist. A little bit of Twist from Thom Yorke's new album, Anima. He joins me right now from our CBC studio in Montreal in anticipation of his shows coming up this week in Canada. And besides throwing a brightly lit tambourine at the audience in the moment of that.
I was berating someone else for shaking it while I was trying to concentrate.
Oh, for God's sake! Well, I don't blame
but,
you for that.
That's actually not a bad idea. Maybe I should do it the other way around.
You know what? I'll take 10%. It'll be fine. I want to talk to you a little bit about your voice. I had a realization listening to your record that I've been really listening to your voice for a very, very long time, and I'm curious about it. Did your voice always work the way you wanted it to, or was that a process?
I think I only started to get comfortable with my voice towards the end of recording OK Computer. Up until that, I was struggling with trying to sort of not get engaged in the emotion of what you're doing. That might sound a bit daft, but I would get I'd get really nervous when I had to do takes. So I had the odd relationship in my voice where I had a concept of what it would be, and it was never that. And so because I wasn't very confident in myself, I'd be like, well, I need to keep trying until it's that.
Can you articulate what you wanted it to be?
It was just not being confident in one's own voice, and so you're kind of referencing other singers, or you don't feel it's emotional enough. I mean, a lot of the time as well, because the songs we were doing a lot of live shows, I think I expected it to be more raucous, and then when you get in the studio, it's like, actually, it shouldn't be that raucous, and I used to get really out of it and then try and sing and then wonder why it didn't work, all this kind of stuff. And the reason I would try and get out of it is because I wanted to get into the zone, man. But in fact, there's just you're wasting your time with that stuff because it's about being in the moment. And I think discovered soon after that record, when we started doing Kid A, that being in the moment and singing is exactly the point, regardless of warts and all. If you're there right with it, it's gonna work. So just relaxing with your own identity.
Are you a vocal rest person? How do you take care of it on the road?
How do I take care of it on the road? I'm a good boy, and I warm up and I warm down, and I don't try and get into trouble.
I guess I'm always
nowadays.
Well, that's the thing. I'm always curious
Not
about
so much
that.
In the past, Chris.
Yeah, I spoke to Flea one time, and he said, I said, what's the backstage at the Red Hot Chili Peppers shows these days like?
I've been there a lot.
Yeah, he said it's a lot more brown rice and tea than perhaps we were used to in the 90s.
It's quite a place. I mean, well, I've toured with him, and I got used to talking to him while he's doing his scales. On the bass. Listen, Flea. Yeah, what?
But it is a different backstage situation, I'm guessing, from when you guys first started touring.
The backstage. See, can I remember that far back? The backstage was like. I seem to remember in the early days we hadn't figured out that you should get rid of people backstage, and then we went the other way, and so. Then we discovered we should get rid of people, and then it was like a ghost town backstage. There was nobody allowed at all, even after the shows. And then now it's kind of a bit relaxed. It's not crazy. Whereas when we used to tour with R.E.M., Michael, I'd be sitting talking to Michael, and he would say, "Oh, gotta go on," and he'd grab a glass of wine and just walk on. You're like, "Is that it?"
Doesn't Mick Jagger run backwards on a treadmill or something like that?
He does a lot of work. That guy. He's extremely skinny.
Yeah, doesn't he? Not
well impressive. No, I saw the Stones. They did. Oh man, what was that record? They did a whole record in the Fonda in LA. Sticky Fingers, back to back, the whole thing.
Oh wow!
It was absolutely amazing.
Like in a small club.
Yep, it was amazing. I was really surprised at how great it was.
It's a funny thing, because I like my uncle had a ticket to go to see the Rolling Stones in Indianapolis, so I flew down to see him, and it was at the Speedway. It was this gigantic sort of mammoth thing that I'm really not used to in Canada, and it was great. But all I could think to myself was, I wonder what this would be like at the El Macambo in Toronto. Like, what would this be like with 175 people? Or I think it's meant for that.
The only thing that was distracting was Keith's teeth.
How are they looking?
Well, every time he smiles, they're like, wow, they're so white.
Yeah. I think two of them are real too. I think it's, there's a conversation that's happening right now, at least in Canada, and I'm sure it's happening in the UK as well. Around artists speaking up about moments in our society right now. Be it climate change, be in your case, maybe Brexit or climate change. And
they're all linked.
Well, for sure. I see you as someone who has never waned from speaking out about things. I'm wondering how you see the role of an artist in a time like this.
Well, I guess everybody's angry, and everybody's polarizing. So my tendency is to get too angry, too vitriolic about these things. So I've kind of tried to take a step back and probably not done very well.
Well, I see on Twitter. I see your a fair bit of stuff going up.
Yeah, but I think that I read a lot. I have been obsessed with the stuff going on behind. There's forces moving around behind the scenes that, to me, are the same in America, the same in Britain, and they all. I can't help feeling that the reason that we're being distracted with a couple of clowns on either side is directly because certain people want us to be focused on a concept of our own self destruction, rather than looking outward and thinking there's a much bigger problem here. We're arguing about who said what to whom while ice sheets are melting, while alarm bells are going off. And I can't help thinking that that's deliberate. I come to the conclusion that this has not happened by accident. I really don't believe it's happened by accident. And I think probably in a year's time we'll be looking back at this period, and hopefully these particular monkeys will be put back in their cages, and we'll be seeing the people behind them, the little puppeteers, or rather large, dark puppeteers, and realizing, okay, the reason we've just been through all this is because they wanted us to pull away from what we really need to do, which is to act.
But what about you? Like, you have teenage kids, and at the same time that you're probably anxious and nervous for their future, are you also sort of inspired by their generation?
I am. I just don't want us to disappoint them, because we're the ones who actually have to do something about it. It's going to be too late if it's them in charge.
You've been generous with your time. I just have a couple of questions left for you before we.
Oh, I'm just getting warmed up. You're kidding?
Well, listen, I can get a cot out. We can do another 2 or 3 hours. I got some kids on ecstasy out in the hallway. We can.
I ain't said anything yet. Anyway, they don't care.
I want to talk to you about nostalgia, because earlier I was talking to you a little bit about the way you create is to try and do something new every time you step into the studio. And then on the other hand, I can't help but think it's an interesting situation you find yourself in as an artist with a following, because on the other hand, you have a huge audience with a lot of emotional attachment to your back catalog, to Radiohead songs. How do you navigate nostalgia?
I don't really feel that we've turned into a nostalgia outfit.
No, not at all.
Not at all. There's things I enjoy about it. We did like 3 or 4 shows at Madison Square Garden in a row. Was it 3 or 4? Can't remember. And we did pretty much a different set every night. And we still managed to keep everybody interested. And that really was quite an amazing experience. It was really fun. It was really challenging, because like we're throwing songs at each other, and we're like looking at each other going, okay, what happens now? What, do we get at the bridge yet? Wait, what happens here? It's quite on edge, because you just having to. We had like 66 or 70 different tunes we were playing on that tour. So there's some elements of nostalgia that I really enjoy. And I'm also kind of fascinated to look back at what we've done and try and remember who the hell it was who wrote that and who the hell it was who played it. Because there's oftentimes we'll be halfway through the song and I'm asking myself, how on earth did we get to this point? How did we find this? because I don't remember it. I'm looking at it from so far away. I don't remember the process. There's things I like about it. Yeah, I don't really, because I guess I'm still working and doing new things all the time, and we all are. It doesn't really bother me. If we were touring endlessly, playing the same stuff, then you'd be talking to a different person right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I'd ever heard anyone be sort of, and I mean critical in the actual use of the word critical, and not critical in the negative use of the word critical, but an analytical of fame or a hit song was My Iron Lung. Like, I remember when I heard My Iron Lung off the Bends, and I kind of did my nerdy kid thing and looked into it and started reading this thing that it was about you kind of dealing with creep at the time. It was the first time I'd ever heard anyone sort of be again analytical about a big hit or about the way the fans relate to your art.
Yeah, I mean I was taught to be analytical. I've taught far too well. In fact, I've had to jettison it somewhat. If you do literature for 3 years at university, you never want to be analytical again in your life, but you end up seeing things in a certain way, I guess. Yeah.
I have to switch tones a little bit here, but I did want to ask you about this. It's not easy for me to ask you about, but as I mentioned earlier in the show, you're set to perform in Toronto this week. And Thom, it's the first time since the end of the inquest into the death of your friend and drum tech Scott Johnson. I know it was tough to come back to Toronto with Radiohead last year. How are you feeling about coming to Toronto now?
I'm okay with it. I think we made our point. We talked a lot about it, I think you get to a point where we feel we know who's responsible, they know who's responsible, that there's people who haven't been held to account. We know that will happen at some point. And at the same time, the emotionally generous thing to do is to move on and register it, but not allow the anger of it, because believe me, the words cannot describe the feelings that went along with it for us and our crew. But in the act of going and playing in Toronto and standing in silence, I think that silence is our last word on the subject, and that I felt that silence was a bell that sounded very loudly, and I hope that people heard it for Scott's sake and for his family. And we don't want to punish the people of Canada for this, because it wasn't their fault. We know exactly whose fault it was, and they'll be held accountable at some point. So, is that all right? Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, it does. I just want to say I know I have friends who tour manage and they work on big tours and stuff like that, and and they said to me, if nothing else, it was just nice to hear an inquest lead to recommendations, just about how their jobs can be safer, about how live events can be safer.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, that has to be the case, surely, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you talking about it, and I appreciate you taking the time today. I'm excited about the show. Does performing? I'll close off like this. Does performing solo like this, or with your crew there on the solo tour? And I think about what Johnny's doing by himself, and what everyone's kind of doing by themselves within Radiohead. Does it bring something different to the band when you come back?
I'm sure it shall. I'm kind of excited to see what happens next, to be honest. I was at the Royal Albert Hall when Johnny did his new piece. I was so proud of him. It was really cool. It was a really cool moment. Especially just beforehand, they played like this Steve Reich piece, and there was this old boy in the audience who went, "Absolute rubbish." I thought, yes, we're in the right place.
You said, "Mick Jagger, what are you doing? What are you doing here?" Oh, I'm glad that happens. I'm glad. I don't know. I just think when bands spend that much time on the road, they must never talk to one another again. I'm glad you guys are showing up for one another's gigs.
Yeah, it was a fun night.
I bet it is. And by the way, I saw the Edward Norton, the Motherless Brooklyn.
Oh, right.
And I heard your song in that.
Yeah, that was fun too. I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, I spoke to him. Did you know his grandfather invented the shopping mall?
What?
Edward Norton's grandfather invented the shopping mall.
Well, I am with him a lot, and he's never told me that. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he's winding you up.
No, man, I found it out on my own.
Really?
And I asked him about it. Send him a text.
So why hasn't he told me that?
He must be ashamed.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
You were the one who was, telling people to read No Logo. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't want to tell you about it.
No. He's right there with that.
I'm only joking. Nice to talk to you, by the way.
Cheers, man.
All right.